Happy New Year.
It's like I got a gun.
There's guns in a lot of things.
Cynthia Cheng shows off some of the souvenirs from her most recent trips. A poster from North Korea and photos from the island of Socotra in the Arabian Sea off the coast of Yemen. That trip took her through the Yemeni capital, Sana'a, shortly after it had been captured by al-Houthi rebels in the country's vicious civil war.
In hindsight, we were actually very lucky at the time we decided to go because we had known that the rebels had seized both the city and the airport itself. And so there was a lot of hesitation whether or not we would continue through in our journey.
Her trip to North Korea might seem tame in comparison, but that reclusive country can also be a dangerous place for young Western travelers.
How I have made the worst mistake of my life.
Remember this young American sentenced to 15 years hard labor for taking down a poster.
North Korea has been a showstopper. A lot of people get really shocked when I tell them I've been to North Korea.
Both Yemen and North Korea have the rare distinction of being on the Canadian government's list of countries to which Canadians should avoid all travel. There are only 13 countries on that list, including Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. The advisories warn of limited Canadian consular assistance should anything go wrong.
Basically just says welcome to Pyongyang.
But Cheng, in her mid-20s at the time, was not about to be deterred by a government website.
And you need to take that advisory with a grain of salt, and because it's there for people's safety, obviously. But if I were to restrict my travels to all of the 100% safe countries, I would be pretty limited.
Travelers Cheng's age have been turning their backpacks on those 100% safe countries and heading to more remote and sometimes more dangerous regions. People have been studying the phenomenon, including a researcher in recreation and leisure studies at the University of Waterloo. For her research, Nargis Abdihad questioned 185 Canadian backpackers about their motivations and concerns. Fear of terrorism ranked low.
Based on previous studies, we can argue that some experienced travelers prefer to ignore the influence of terrorism because of its large unpredictability.
We go to Antarctica.
Bruce Poon Tip can also provide some insight. He is founder of G Adventures, a tour company with a few destinations on Canada's Avoid Non-Essential Travel list.
Younger travelers do look at those things differently too. Like the older generation would see any travel advisory, wouldn't even have to read it, and they would just consider if there's any travel advisory, we won't go.
For most of us, freedom is easy.
He says the lure of an exclusive and often cheap vacation far outweighs remote dangers, especially among young travelers.
This is your planet.
He uses the example of Egypt, a country with an extensive tourism infrastructure, but for now, few tourists.
The hotels are extremely aggressive in trying to get business again, and a lot of those services that were used to have to line up for. I mean, Egypt, when it's full and doing well, it's almost like an amusement park. So many people travel there all the time.
All your houses is made out of mud.
That's what Maggie Zhu found on her trip there in January. She and a few other friends in their 20s traveled through the Middle East and Africa. Undeterred by the government's warning to avoid all non-essential travel there, she says they did take precautions. Using a web tool that tracks ISIS attacks, they avoided certain areas.
Every day I was just checking just to make sure that, because for the shooting, a lot of them just go to a hotel and start shooting. So you can't avoid anything, right? If it does happen.
The research has found the young risk-taking travelers can be divided into two groups: those looking to brag on social media about their travel feats, and the larger group like Cheng and Zhu, young people willing to assess risks against a payoff of unique and very personal experiences they'll remember for a lifetime. Ron Charles, CBC News, Toronto.